everyone, and welcome back to Liz Sews. In today's video, I'm going to be going over how I fit the Fenway bra to myself. So I did a similar video to this last year on the Chloe bra, and it was quite well received. I'd always been sort of hesitant about doing these how I fit my bra videos, just because I don't want people to think that the changes that I make to my bra necessarily are going to have to be made to every single person's version of this bra. Like, these are the fitting changes unique to my specific body, but I think a lot of people found it interesting and just the methodology and the process that I took. So I'm hoping to make this sort of a more ongoing series on my channel, maybe once a month, maybe every other month. I'm going to take a different pattern and show you all of the steps that I took to fitting it. So this is the Fenway bra from Orange Lingerie. I think that this bra in particular is one that people have had a lot of problems fitting or getting a good fit on. So I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to tackle this one first. So the first thing that I want to do, I know that my wire size does not correspond to my cup volume size. Now, there are some pattern companies like Annie and Myra and Porcelain who give you the option of several different wires for each cup, and that makes a huge difference when it comes to fitting. But in this particular pattern designers, that isn't an option, so we're going to have to do this ourselves. So I do print out two different cups. I print out a cup that matches my wire, and I print out a cup that matches my volume. So I like to use a 40 regular wire. So I've printed out the 38C. I do have a 38 band in the Fenway bra, so I'm just trying to find the 38C is what's going to match my wire. And then I also printed out the 38A cup, and this is the cup that I need for my volume. So when I do all my measurements and stuff like this, this is the cup that it says I should be using based on my measurements. And so what I want to do is sort of like mash these two together. I want the wire line of this cup with the volume of this cup. Now, the first thing I'm going to do on my Fenway is check my wire line. Even though I've got a 38C, which is supposed to use a 40 wire, I always double check it. And on this pattern in particular, that was super important. So this pattern doesn't tell you what size style wires to use, I think it might even say that it uses a regular day style wire, but I have not found that to be the case. And the way that you can check this is to just walk your wire. So you know the wire touches this edge here, this edge here, this edge, and this edge. So I'm just going to take my wire and walk it. So when you're looking at your wire, you want to make sure that you're not including, you're going to have some fold over elastic up here, which is going to take like 1/4 of an inch, and you want to leave yourself a little bit of wire play as well. So you want that wire play accounted over here and over here as well. So the fold over elastic is going to take about 1/4 of an inch, and leave myself maybe like 1/8 of an inch for wire play, just a little bit. And what wire play is that extra space in the channeling so when your wire springs open, it can sort of like move a little bit. And having wire play or just extra room in that underwire channeling means you're less likely to get wires that are poking through after you wear it a couple times. So if you're wearing your bra and your wires are poking through, the first thing I would check is to make sure that you have wire play or a little extra room for that wire to sort of wiggle around in there. So I've marked off where the fold over elastic will take up and my wire play, and then I'm just going to start walking my wire along that edge. So there, and it's going to come to the seam allowance, not to the end of the cup piece, and bring it back here, and we want to match up that seam allowance and then continue walking my wire along this curve. And you can sort of mark things. That makes it a little bit easier as you're transferring from piece to piece. Again, line it up with your seam allowance and then walk that curve. Match that up to your seam allowance, and then sure enough, what I see here is that my wire is too long. And based on where I said I wanted the wire to end, accounting for wire play and seam allowances and all of that stuff, my wire is too long by a full inch. So you have a couple options. Option A, you can cut your wire down. So you can cut an inch off of your wire and sort of finish the edge of it. That's one option. But personally, I know that I really like this wire. So I want to make the bra fit my wire. And so that means I'm going to need to add an inch over here. And in order to add that inch, we just need to take our pattern piece, stick it onto a piece of paper, and then I'm going to bring myself up 1 inch on this edge. So if I bring my ruler over and just mark 1 inch here. Now, all other things being equal, I think I'm going to come back to that same original point that's on my bra. So I just need to connect the corner point that already exists to my 1 inch up point over here. And I'm using just a slight gentle curve on this because I want to sort of mimic the line that was already pre-existing. So that's going to be my first step in order to be able to use regular day style wires. So let me get that cut out. So first step done. I've made it now so that it can accommodate my favorite wire, which is the normal day style wire. So the next thing you probably want to look at is the bridge itself. So you could extend the top of this bridge by 1 inch as well, so that you'd have that continuous line that moves from the neckline across. But when I was looking at it, I decided I kind of liked the idea of doing this sort of notched edge neckline that came down and then the bridge and came up and over. So I'll pop up a picture of the bra I've done over here. So that's the Fenway, and I've left the bridge as is, without making any changes to it. And you can see how the wire line and the upper cut piece just extends a little bit further than the bridge. But if you wanted to extend the bridge, of course, it's a really easy thing to do. So I'm just going to draw a line that's 1 inch up, right? Because we're just adding an inch on. That was the difference. And then I'm just going to sort of continue the curve of my bridge up until I meet that line. Like that. And like that. So here we have the bridge that's extended up 1 inch like this. So for a normal bra, you need to make sure that you have 3/8 of an inch between those seam allowance markings, and that's going to be where your underwire channeling sits. The Fenway bra in particular, it is a partial band bra, so the underwire channeling actually flips into the cup instead of into the bridge. So in this case, it's completely fine that our bridge is super narrow like that. There's no issues at all because you're not actually going to have any underwire channeling in there. So if I just give this guy a quick trim. So that's what that bridge piece would look like if I had extended it up all the way so that it matches with the neckline edge of the pattern piece, of the uppercut pattern piece. Or you can just not do that, either way. Okay, so now that we've looked at the wire and got that all situated, the next thing we need to do is figure out how we get the wire line of that and the volume of that and mash it together. So the way that I'm doing it, I have a larger wire and smaller volume, but this also works the other direction if you have a larger volume and a smaller wire. So let's say that even though you're like a G cup, the root trace that matches your anatomy is going to be the wire line of a D cup. So it works both directions. So what I'm going to do is combine these two pattern pieces into one. And just like in garment sewing, so quite frequently in garment sewing, you might grade from one size at your bust to a different size at your waist and vice versa. That's basically what we're going to do here. So I'm going to take the two corresponding pattern pieces. We'll set these aside for now. And I've got my 38C on the bottom, and then I'm going to align my 38A on top of it. I'm going to like sort of put it in the center. So basically what I want to do is figure out where my wire line is. So on this particular pattern, my wire line is down here. So I want to take the wire line of my bigger piece and the volume of my smaller piece. And the easiest way to do that is to draw a line, of course, from the top of my small piece and then grade it out to the larger wire line. So I'm just gonna, like there. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that on both sides of my cut piece. And then I have those lines marked in onto here, and then I can just trim away. So obviously along the wire line, I'm not making any difference, but then when it comes to the center of the cup, that's where you're gonna see most of the things cut off, giving me my smaller volume over there. So now what I have is this modified piece that has the wire line of my larger cut piece and the volume of my smaller one. And if I overlay these on top of each other, you can see just that little bit of difference is going to happen right here along the wire line. So I would go ahead and do that for both of the lower cut pieces. So let's say that you have the opposite problem of me, where you need a smaller wire and a bigger cup. So I would take the bigger cup on the bottom and the smaller cup on the top. And instead of grading from the smaller to the big line, we're going to do the opposite direction. We're going to grade from the small line here out into the larger one. So I would grade from the wire line of the small cup and just sort of do a nice gentle curve until I meet my larger cup piece like that. Same thing over here. So this is if you're maybe like an omega breast or something like that, where your wires are smaller than your cup would suggest. And in this case, we would take the large cup piece and we're actually taking stuff away just from the wire line edge. But we're keeping everything up here the same. So that's if you have an omega shaped body, and this is how you would do it if you have a shallow shaped body like me, or bigger wire, smaller volume. Okay, so I've gone ahead and done my adjustment to both of these pieces because I'm going to need that moving forward. The next thing I need to do is figure out, make sure that this cross cup seam, which is what matches along here, make sure that works out. I might need to take some length off of here, because if I compare my 38C, which is my wire, to my volume one, you can see that it is significantly shorter. So I need to make sure that this cross cup seam matches up. And if not, make the alterations in order to get it to do this. So just like we sort of did with the wire, is I'm gonna walk this along the edge, overlapping my seam allowances. Can tell now that I've already got a shorter one here, so I'm going to need to alter where that notch marking is. So again, aligning, this point here with my new notch mark. And yep, sure enough, I've got something that is too long. And so if I compare these two, does that make sense? Yep. It actually does make sense. So if I have my shorter wire line piece, this is my 38A, and I overlay it on top, it does end exactly where I marked out that it would end. So in this case, I'm just going to cut off that excess. So now I have all of this designed so that it should fit with my wire and my volume. And so I made the bra up using this pattern like so, and I tested the fit. And one thing that I noticed is that when I tested the fit using the pattern like this, I got some gaping along this neckline edge here. So I wanted to make some alterations. When I pinched out my gaping, I saw about a 1-inch gape. So what I'm gonna do is actually take this out in 2 separate locations, 1/2 inch each, because if I take it out in a single location, I might get some funny sort of curves happening. So you do need to make up the bra just to see how things are fitting and then adjust and gauge what it is you need to make your changes to next. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and change this in 2 separate locations. I'm just going to pick some arbitrary locations. I'm going to cut maybe here and up here. So I'm going to cut through my piece and I'm going to leave a little bit of paper right at the seam line, which will allow me to sort of hinge things so they're still attached, but I got the ability to sort of hinge and move it. So like there, it's still slightly attached, but I can hinge. And I'm going to do that in both of those locations. Okay. And I'm going to take 1/2 inch in both locations. So I'm just going to mark in 1/2 inch on both of these. It's a guideline to tell me how much I'm going to overlap. So I'm just going to take that hinged piece and overlap it to my 1/2 inch mark. And it's okay if stuff sort of gets wobbly. Tape that down and hinge this one over to my 1/2 inch mark and tape that down. So the next thing you would of course do is copy this over onto a new piece of pattern tissue, and you would want to sort of smooth out this edge. So I would just take my ruler like this and do a nice curve that's going to sort of like mimic that and get rid of all of these little jogs and sharp corners. So I would do that along that edge as well as this edge here, just sort of smoothing stuff out. So I made another version of the bra with that alteration, and it looked really, really good along the neckline. I didn't have any more gaping. The only thing I noticed is that I felt like the strap attachment point was too far towards the center, so too much towards my center front. I have particularly broad shoulders. I do not find strap attachments that are above my apex to be particularly flattering. I also find them really uncomfortable. And I know that this is not normal. I hardly have ever seen anyone complain about straps being too far towards the center except for me. So the last thing that I wanted to do on this pattern is to adjust that strap attachment point. And I do have a more in-depth video talking about moving your strap attachment point, but basically I am going to draw a horizontal line across this cup. Like so. That's going to be my cut line. And then I'm going to draw 2 register markings. I'm going to draw one that's just sort of arbitrary. It doesn't matter where it goes. And I want to move my strap over by a full, let's say 3/4 inch on this one. So I'm going to draw another register mark that is 3/4 inch away. See, I don't have a good ruler for this. I'm going to draw another one that is 3/4 inch away. Okay. So for moving my strap attachment point, I'm just going to cut along that horizontal line, like so. And then I want to match this register line to the register line down there. So this is the original place, and then I'm just going to slide it over by 3/4 inch and to tape that in place. And then of course, I'm going to need to clean this up. So when I talk about cleaning up, the main thing I want to keep intact, I want to keep all of my main points of interest intact. So the top of this point here, and this point, and this point, and this point, and this point. I want them to all stay in the exact same location, but I'm just going to sort of clean up these curves and make everything look a lot nicer and smoother. So for the neckline edge here, I'm going to, and you may need to play around with different rulers and sort of check and do some different things, but this looks good to me. So I'm just gonna draw in that curve like this. I have linked, so these smaller rulers are from Clover and they come in a 3-piece set. I've linked them down in the description box below. I am not sponsored or anything. I just really love these rulers and I get a lot of questions about them. So they're down in the description box if you're interested. So I've just done that sweeping line there that looked like it sort of matched my neckline edge. And then along here, obviously I have this huge bit that sort of juts out because of us moving our strap line point. I want to, again, make sure I'm meeting this register point there and the point up there, but I can just sort of draw my line in however I want. So on this particular one, I'm going to err on cutting more off of that uppercut piece because I didn't want this cutting into my arms anymore. I just wanted to move the strap attachment. So you can see how I've met this point with this point and just sort of like eyeballed in what a nice curve is going to look like. And then for the bottom as well, we have a nice gentle curve. I'm going to start out connecting my point there to my point there. And generally when I'm doing it, I'm doing this from the seam allowance mark, and then I'm going to go back in and draw in my seam allowance separately. So most of your pattern alterations are done sans seam allowance. Yeah, I don't like that one. I feel like that one's veering off too much. So for here, we're going to need a little bit more of a curve. Like that. Yeah, like that. So I'm going to make all of my alterations along my seam allowance line and then come back in and draw my seam allowance separately. Of course, along the neckline was fold over elastic, so that didn't have any seam allowance. We didn't have to worry about that. I'm talking more about down in these sections here. Okay, so that's going to be what my new uppercut piece would look like with all of those alterations. And once I had constructed the bra with all of those changes, I really liked how it looks and I was done. So in this particular instance, I'm looking at, I think I did 2 practice bras before I got to the real one. I did a practice bra just with the wire line volume adjustment, and then I did a practice bra with the gaping neckline adjustment before realizing I needed to move my strap. And so once I got to the third iteration of the bra, I had something that I liked and was wearable. Generally, for me, it takes me 2 to 3 times through a bra to get something that's going to fit perfectly. Because the first iteration I make, a lot of times you make those changes and you might notice something else. So like in this instance, I made the changes and then I noticed that this was off. And that's not something I saw until I made all of the rest of my changes. So even as an experienced bra maker for myself, I am still looking at 2 to 3 versions of a bra before I have something that I think is worth adding into my lingerie rotation. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this look at the Fenway bra and the steps that I took in order to get it to fit myself. Let me know down in the comments section below if there's any pattern in particular that you're really interested in seeing how I fit it to myself. And I will see everyone next time. Take care.